Hey, welcome to Viking Preparedness. I am Pastor Joe Fox on take 3. Water. Hey, you've seen spy movies, right? Where our guy, the spy, is on the run and somehow he gets access to a safe deposit box or a locker in a train station or an airport or something like that, which contains a bag, and inside either the safety deposit box or the bag is everything he needs, right, to get back on his feet. It has money, it always has guns and stuff because they look cool on film, maybe some knives, identification, different passports and different names, different money in different denominations because you don't know where he's going to go. And sometimes they show other things too. Those are real. Hollywood does its own thing with it, but those are real things. And in this video, I would like to get you thinking for yourself. I know you're not a spy, but I'd like you to get thinking for yourself on the concept of operational caches. But first, cue the intro. Pastor Joe got a new toy. What is it? Let me see, how big is it? It's only that big. Ooh, it's behind my hand. There's a clue. Pow! Can you see that? Looks like a silhouette on my angle. There we go. Look at that. This is a Ruger LCP2 6+1 of 380. Boom, boom. No, it's not a Glock 9mm or something else, but it is very small. And when I was at the gym today running for about 40 minutes on a treadmill, this was a lot nicer in my waistband than something bigger and heavier. All right, operational caches. You know, I like to have options. I like to have choices. I like to have flexibility. Options provide flexibility, right? I like to be able to move here or move here. If something happens over here, I want to go that way, you know. And I also want you to have flexibility. I want you to have options as well. And so, no, I know you're not a spy. And I know that maybe some of you aren't even super serious preppers. Bear with me. Think about this. Let it stew in your head while you're driving to work. And maybe you can take something from this talk and apply it to your situation or situations. An operational cache, and the word is cache, that's how it's pronounced, is just something that is stored away in advance with the thought that if something bad happens to the recoverer of that cache, the person who's going to get it and use it, it will help them get back on their feet. When I was in Special Forces, we used all kinds of different caches for different purposes. And one of them was our operational cache, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details on it, on things, just not going to. But I will tell you this. For as high speed as you think Special Forces is, you know what was in our operational cache mostly? Communication means, medical gear, water, and bullets. That was it. And really the important thing, we hoped, was the radio. Hey, yep, we're alive. This is what we're doing. This is what we need. Thanks. That's what was in our operational cache, for the most part. When I lived in earthquake country in California, my family developed our operational cache, if you will, because I started thinking, what happens if there's an earthquake and our house falls down? And so we had a little shed out in our backyard away from the house, and it was just one of those metal, you know, erector set, all the little screws you have to screw together, sheds like you stick a lawnmower in. And we kept a duffel bag in there, and the duffel bag had a set of clothing, including shoes, for every member of the family. We figured, hey, if we have to run from the house, start naked, at least we can get dressed. And then we also had a tent and stuff like that, our camping gear we kept out there, and stuff like that. So we figured, worst comes to worst, big earthquakes or terrible aftershocks or something, we can get this cache, go across the street to the soccer field, pitch our tent, and, you know, wait for the cavalry. Since we lived in California, every time we moved, we did the same thing. I have been talking recently about bug out locations, and we're almost done with that for those of you who are bored with that. But I mentioned you should have a plan for if somebody blows you out of your bug out location and you have to flee for your life in the middle of the cold, dark night. You should have caches available that you can get to that will allow you to get operational again. What does operational mean to you? I don't know. Operational to you may mean it's February. We got blown out of the place in our, boxers. It's cold, and on the way out somebody took a bullet, and so I would like to get everybody warm. I would like to get everybody medically treated that needs to be, and because I'm me, I want to get rearmed. Right, because for whatever reason I didn't grab a gun that I was sleeping next to. I don't know, stuff happens, right? But I want to have a cache that I can do that. Maybe you and so I can run away, let's just say. Maybe you want a cache that, same scenario, you get blown out of the house, you want to arm your little militia and immediately go back and attack. Those are different things, right? We're going to run away, continue running away, or we're going to turn right back around and go back and take what's ours. Different things. Well, what operation are you planning? See, that's the first thing you have to think about. You have to envision a scenario that you're going to need this cache, and I just told you, stuff happens when you least expect it. I'm in my perfect bug out place and a forest fire comes and consumes the 100 square miles that I'm sitting on. I can't stay here anymore. Woe is me. What am I going to do? Maybe something happened while I was down at the creek watering the goats and I don't even get to get back to my house. Oh no, what do I do? Right? Bump, whatever. Then you have to think, what operation do you want to be conducting? Do you want to run away? Do you want to reset up? Do you want to move on and establish a camp? I talked maybe to the warriors on up in the additional notes about, maybe not, maybe to everybody, I don't remember, about the spike camp idea, where it's an emergency bug out location that's basically a campsite in a box, if you will, that's hidden away in the woods. That could be considered an operational cache. I'm going to get there and set up operations, which is surviving. Right, living. I'm going to pitch my tent, get the pot out, start heating up some water, whatever. But that's what you need to envision. What operation do you want to continue to do, and what made you get into the situation that you can't do it right now without your cache? That will determine what needs to go into your cache. You've heard the old saw, the man with more skills needs less gear. That's true. To a degree. I can start fires very well. I can start fires in the rain with flint and steel, real flint, like a piece of rock and a piece of metal, char cloth. I can do that in the rain. I know that because I've done it. I had to do it for a test one time. But you know what? In my winter bob, I carry a stove, a whisper light, because I can go click and have hot beverages to warm everybody up that fast. All right, so do I need it? No. Would I like it? Yes. You may be in a situation where you think you're going to have to enter the Underground Railroad and you're going to have to flee. The black Suburbans are coming up the road. We gots to go. It's February. Your wife and 3-year-old are coming out of the house in their nightgowns. What do? You might want to have an intermediate assembly point that has stuff in it. Clothes, boots, sleeping bags, This would be a cache of sorts, right? It would be hidden. You don't necessarily know that you're going to use it, but you think that you might have to. I remember hearing about a guy. I may get some of the facts wrong, but the story was related to me by a man tracker. And as I recall, law enforcement was closing in on some white supremacist, whatever, neo-Nazi type person. I don't know who it was, so whatever. This was like the flavor of what I was told, who was actually the paramilitary leader of an organization, and they were closed, like the trainer, and they were closing in on him. And when they kicked his door in and came in, there was and again, I'm just kind of going with what I remember from the story. I don't know the story personally, but there was like a bowl of oatmeal still steaming and the back door's open, right? This guy took off, and what they found out he had done is he had basically a bob, an operational cache that was hanging in a tree out in the woods behind his house, and the cord from the bag went up over a limb. It was up high, went up over a limb and then down to another tree, and there was a knife stuck in a stump or something, like an old sheath knife. And so this guy's running for his life, grabs that knife, cuts that cord, catches his rucksack, and keeps going. I always thought that was kind of cool, right? That was kind of neat. There was another group that was coming through the Canadian border into the U.S., probably Montana, Washington, Idaho, somewhere in there, and something was hinky. The law suspected them. Shots were exchanged. They took off into the U.S. with the law on their back, and went through some small town at like 90 miles an hour that just happened to be having like a bloodhound conference of law enforcement or something, like, you know, national. And so the chase is on, and they lose them and they catch them, and they lose them and they catch them. Anyway, they find their car in some woodlands, trunks popped, and it was a man and a woman, and they're gone. And so the dogs are searching and searching, and you know, they can't find the guy. And so the guy telling the story was a man tracker. They call him like 24 hours later and say, "Hey, can you help us out?" Well, the scene's a mess, you know, where they started their run from the car here. But it's a long story short. Anyway, when they opened up their trunk, what they had in their trunk was little bug out bags. Hold on. Not unlike this, right? That they grabbed out of the trunk. And they also had different shoes, and they ran for a while in their one set of shoes, and then they changed them trying to throw off the dogs or something. I don't know. The story's much longer than that and more in depth. But they had an operational cache in the trunk of their car, right? I mean, if you think along these lines. And so I was going back to thinking, because I don't want to frustrate anybody here. I really don't. I don't mind challenging you. I don't mind even ticking you off if it spurs you to action. I mean, you know, it's a technique, right? But I really don't want you to get frustrated, dejected. Oh, I could never do that. And so I started going back in my head to when would the advice that I've been given in the last couple days seem overwhelming to me. I guess I'm blessed. I had to go really far back because my wife and I got really serious we were pretty serious about prepping when we were dating in college, believe it or not. And then when we got married, we kind of ramped up pretty quick because I had money and, you know, access to information, stuff like that. But I've been telling y'all you need a bug out location that's separate from where you live, and then you need an alternate, you need a contingency, and you need an emergency, and that's freaking people out. And I was thinking, well, PJ, how would you have done that when you were a second lieutenant and somebody told you you needed a bug out location? And the reason I say second lieutenant is because they don't make a whole lot of money, right? So it's not like I had a whole lot of money to do anything. We couldn't even buy pizza ordered in. We didn't have the money for that. So, and I didn't know about bug out locations then. So I didn't have one. So I'm thinking if somebody told me, hey, you need a bug out location, and I started thinking about it, I probably would have done the spike camp. That's what I call it. The cabin cache. I probably would have picked a part of the woods because my wife and I, we were living in Hawaii, and some of the things we thought about were, looking back on it in retrospect, man, hey, at least we were trying, but it seemed very silly to me now, looking back. But we actually had a place in the Kahuku Mountains, which are these mountains in Hawaii, very jungly, very steep, very rugged mountains, that she and I, we had no kids at the time, were going to flee to in the event of Armageddon or something, and we were going to survive. And we had stuff we were going to take with us. We had bug out bags and foot lockers full of stuff that I hadn't quite figured out how we were going to drag up the side of the Kahukus, but we could cross that bridge when we came to it. But if I had been more sophisticated, I probably would have cached stuff out there. You know, those foot lockers full of stuff. I probably would have put them in some kind of waterproof containers and buried them out there, you know, on the side of some mountain of red dirt. There's a lot of stuff on the internet about caching and cache tubes and things like that. And I may do a video on one, but here's the deal. If I do one, What I don't want to put on video is any of my real caches. I don't necessarily want to put on video what's actually in my caches. I don't want to give people that much information about me. And I'm certainly not going to show video of where my caches are. And so then that leaves me, okay, we'll just do a fake cache for the video. Man, that's a lot of work. Right? But I have these barrels, and they're not here, they're at High Prairie Acres, that at one time contained some kind of soap, I think car wash soap. But they're like pickle barrels, that's what people call them. It's like a 55-gallon drum, but I think it's probably like 45 gallons. And instead of being straight up and down on the sides like most 55-gallon drums are, it kind of bows like that. And then it has this heavy, and it's blue, and it has this heavy-duty black lid that goes on it that screws down, presumably watertight. That would make a pretty good operational cache. You'd have to do the work and dig the hole to put that thing in, but then, you know, the lid would only have to be about this far below ground, right? And it's a big barrel, you know, it's about waist high, you know, barrel, and about this big around. So you do the work, you dig the hole, you put the barrel in there, and then when you need to get to it, you really have to dig down that far, take the lid off, and then reach down in there. You'd have to take strings and tie it to the things in the bottom and bring it up to the top, and, you know, you can do that. I made like a marionette thing for a couple of our caches that had these pieces of string, and it was actually nylon cord that went down to items that were down in the bottom, and then it came up, and I had this wheel, this piece of plywood that I'd cut slits into, and they came up and went onto that, and were like, they had knots, and I stapled them, and then I labeled them. You know, this is this. So I could pull it up like a little puppet if I had to. But, you know, I don't have a 4-foot-long arm, so, and I'm not digging up that whole barrel. I've seen some videos online where people take the barrel and they put it in the hillside sideways. That might work. It's not as concealed, right? I have not yet experimented with, and I'm talking underground here, with like somebody mentioned on one of the comments the black bin with the yellow lid. I have a couple of those for my tactical gear because they're really strong, but I haven't like tried putting them underwater. Probably wouldn't work, or underground. Truck boxes are pretty good, and there's basically 3 kinds of caches and only 2 that you're going to mess with, because you're probably, unless you're a scuba diver, not going to mess with an underwater cache, so you can forget that one. There's underground caches, buried caches, and then there's concealment caches, which aren't buried, they're hidden. I have a friend who took a 55-gallon steel drum with the lid that goes on and a thing that goes click, and so it makes it watertight. He painted it camouflage, and he hid it in a stand of evergreen trees. That's just one of a bazillion stands of evergreen trees out there. Not in a place where a hunter would set up, not in a place where you would look. Even if you're standing on the side of the evergreen little stand peeing or something, you're not going to see this barrel. And then he put the barrel in there, put a camouflage tarp over it, and I think a camouflage net over that, up against a tree, up inside there. And nobody's ever going to find that thing, right? And so that's where he keeps some stuff. So there's all kinds of ways you can do it. The first thing you have to decide, though, is when I say operational, what kind of operational do you want to get, right? Is this the operation where I open it up and I've got 35 Mosin Nagant, what are they, M44s, and bullet packs, and I start handing them out to the militia? That could be an operational cache. You know, here we go. Is it an operational cache where I just want to get my family on the road, man? And so here I've got bobs for everybody, and you know, let's go. Decide what your operation is. That will determine what your stuff is, and then you can cache it. You don't have to put all your eggs in one basket, but it does make it easier to retrieve it, right? And anything you cache has to be quickly, easily broken down into what we call man-portable bundles, typically 45 pounds or less. So whatever you pull out of there, you don't want to have 100 pounds of whatever in this barrel and then think, well, when the time comes, we'll redistribute it then. You want it in portable packages, in rucksacks, in shoulder bags, and, you know, whatever. Something people can just grab, sling, and go, right? Something to think about. I'm interested in your ideas on operational caches. Oh, and I don't even know if I completed my point. As a second lieutenant, I would go, oh yeah, I did. I would put like a campsite out there. You know, like a tent or a tarp to build a tent, a means to make fire, some food, something to cook with and on, sleeping bags if you need them in your area, because you know you're probably not going to be carrying a sleeping bag around when you go running. Things like that, just to make it, all right, we're living here. We're not going to freeze to death. A good book, Cody Lundine's good information. I hate the way it's presented. Cody Lundine's 98.6, The Fine Art of Keeping Your Ass Alive. It looks like some porno guy drew the cartoons in there or something, but you know, it's, he and I probably wouldn't get along real well, but the information in the book is good. Because the bottom line that he makes, his point for making a survival kit, is the whole thing you want to do is keep the inside of this thing 98.6. No matter, you know, if it's too hot, you need to stay cool. If it's too cold, you want to stay warm. And to do that, you got to feed it and water it. You know, it's kind of an interesting concept. But it's a good book. Think about an operational cache. I did a thing, I know I'm getting long, sorry. I had a board, a website at one time. I've had a couple. And we decided to do the 5-gallon bucket challenge. And we had everybody go and actually pack a 5-gallon bucket with survival stuff. And then once they did that, we had them do a detailed list of what they had in their bucket. And so everybody did. And, you know, a lot of people participate in that. And I actually think, because I looked it up about 5 years ago, if you go to Google and type in 5-gallon bucket challenge or 5-gallon bucket cache challenge, if you play with those two terms, you'll be able to find it on there. And maybe you can figure out who I was. But then I encouraged people when it was done, when they were done building their buckets, the people who did, to go hide their bucket somewhere. Go cache it. Whether that was sticking it in your neighbor's garage with his permission, or taking it to Aunt Millie's place, or burying it in your backyard, or burying it at the place where you normally go hunting. You know, bury it at work. I'll tell you another story. I've told it before, but we have new people. My brother-in-law was going to Disneyland or World, one of the two, with his family. And, you know, parking lots 1,000 miles that way, you hoof it in, then there's a long line, and then you finally get there, it's hot, the kids are going crazy, we want to get them into the park, and there's a sign, you know, no concealed weapons or whatever. He didn't have a gun on him, and then he sees everybody's going through a metal detector, and he's like, crap, because he had a big old folding pocket knife in his pocket, and he knew they were going to find that and not let him bring it in the park. And so what he did is he just made a beeline, and it's a nice park, and they have like these raised planters all around it with flowers and plants and pretty red mulch or something on it. He just sat down and went on the planter, pulled out his knife, and buried it right there in the mulch, just under 3 inches of mulch. Went into the park, had a good time. When they came out, guess where his knife was? Right where he left it, right? No big deal. Start thinking about some operational caches for you, even if it's only putting some contact information, maybe a spare credit card or cash or something, some clothes in a duffel bag and throwing it in the trunk of your car, or throwing it in the garage, or, you know, at the neighbor's house or something, in case something happens. I want you to have flexibility. I want you to get back operational. And remember, when things go to hell, keep calm and Viking on. All right, I'll see you out there.